earlier, snapping.
All right.
Ready? Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from your lunch break. I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch. I just want to take a couple of minutes before we go into Kay's session to just talk about the ASCILITE app. And if you haven't already, you can use the QR code reader up on the screen there and grab it and go and download it. There is an iPhone, an iPad, an Android, and a mobile web version of that app. What I'll just quickly do is I'll just take you through the functionality of the app so that you can see basically how you can use it. Okay, so with the app, you've got the ability to go into the news feeds and have a look at the ASCILITE Twitter feed. You can visit the keynote speakers, the abstracts associated with that. You can have a look at some of the other articles that we'll be posting up there throughout the session. We've also created a Flickr feed which we'll put in there through the photos area of the Springboard, and we'll update that with photos that are being taken through the duration of the conference. Don't be worried, we're not going to put up ones there from the late night section of the party on Tuesday night. You can visit, as I mentioned, you can visit all the keynote speakers and all those sort of things. What you've also got access to is the session information, and we're liaising with the organisers to make sure that the session information is up to date, and we'll update with a few of those changes that are coming through. The other thing that you can find is the maps, and if you're wanting to find out where you can go around the campus, you can actually see where the locations are. You can see where some of the other things that are on Macquarie, when they're open, what's available there. The other thing is if you're having trouble reading a map, flat map like that, what you can also do is we use augmented reality. So what you can do is you click on that orange button and you can actually hold it up and walk around the campus there and actually see where all the buildings and so are. So you can actually see straight up where you're positioned, where the buildings are. So that's pretty much the app in a nutshell. There is also a really good iPad experience as well, which also has access to all the same sort of feeds in a slightly different format, made for the larger form factor of the iPad. So you can see it there. The app itself has been built on Blackboard's Mosaic platform. And the platform is designed specifically to help institutions and organisations create a mobile presence for their learning and teaching, or for their marketing, or things like that. So I encourage you all to download it, play with it. I welcome the feedback from it. Please come past the booth and talk to us if you have any issues with it, or if you'd just like to pass on some feedback. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll now hand over and we can enjoy Kay's presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, we're going to do something now, aren't we? Kay O'Halloran, at the time we invited her to come and speak at the conference, was director of a multimedia lab at the National University of Singapore. Since that time, she's decided to stay in the same time zone but move a little bit closer to Antarctica. And she now is working out of Curtin University. And we've asked her to talk about the past. Okay.
Can you hear me? Is that okay? Great. Thanks so much, John, and I'm delighted to be here. I've never been to an ASCILITE conference before, having been out of the country for 15 years. And I must say, number one, it's a delight to be back in Australia, and it's wonderful to be here at Macquarie. I can smell the campus. It's very much Australia. Okay, I think I've got the easiest task because I'm looking at the past, and the past is the past. I think the other keynotes might have a more difficult time with the present and the future. So what I'd like to do is look at the past. I wasn't sure how long to go back, but I've decided to go back a long way and very quickly move up to the present. Electric Dreams, by the way, was also software, not just the movie. But if we think of the movie, let me just turn this on. If we think of the movie, which won't move, they had no idea in the 80s what was going to happen. And the reason mainly being is that they were thinking of the computer as an individual device, not as a networking device. So the huge change that came about was not because of the computer and what it could do, was the fact that it was networked, basically connecting billions of users right around the world. So it's beyond the 80s. We're well, well beyond even what they could think about back in those years. What I'd like to talk about today, and I will talk and leave 5 to 10 minutes for questions at the end, so I hope to finish about 1:45 because I always like to get feedback. Very quickly, computers past and present. Then looking at communication technologies as agents of change in the world. And then I'll quickly have a look at computers in higher education. And then I'll look at research and software development. And this will be based on my experience as director of the Multimodal Analysis Lab for 5 years, where I was involved in developing technologies. And so this is the past up to today. Very quickly, if we go to the English dictionary, if you think about what is a computer, one of the first ones is the person that makes the calculations. And this was first coined in 1613. In other words, the human calculator. And we can see, as recently as 1949, they were still employing people to do calculations. Basically, this is within NASA, using a slide rule and so forth. If we have a look at a second definition, a device or machine for performing or facilitating calculations, we can see that over history there was always tools for doing calculations back to sticks and stones and so forth. But of course the automatic calculation, the first one is potentially the Abacus. And if you go on Wikipedia, there's thousands of versions of the Abacus. It was used for a very long time in a lot of different cultures. We've got a mechanical computer, basically to looking at time. This is a very sophisticated Greek invention. And then what we've also got, of course, is a numerical system. And there was a huge confrontation in whether people would use the Abacus or whether they would use the Hindu-Arabic system. The Hindu-Arabic system won out for very good reasons. It was a better calculating tool, aided by the printing press, which I'll talk about very shortly. Then we've got the mechanical computational tools. This was Babbage, considered to be the father of the programmable tool. And then, of course, at the Oxford, when we go to the Oxford English Dictionary, finally get to the definition that we know now, which is basically electronic device. So that's very quickly the past in a few minutes, but also at Oxford Dictionary it says also by means of a computer or computing. Turing, considered to be the first person that formalised the notion of algorithm and computation, and notice we're up to 1936, it's fairly recent history. And all of this has a context, is that computers are recent, and I think we're still coming to terms with how we can use them, particularly within education. When you go to these old photos, they're mind-blowing. When you look at the computational setup, this is the first computer, 1941, and then we can move on to ENIAC, which is 1946. We go on to UNIVAC 1, which is 1951, the first US-produced commercial printer. This Polish one looks really cool. It's retro now. You'll notice with all the fashion within design and so forth, the retro look. And then we've got the Ballistic Research Laboratories, 1962. Got the first portable computer, IBM, in 1975. You got the first laptop in 1979. And then you've got the first Apple, but this is actually, it was only the motherboard. This is just was built around it. And then, of course, you've got what happened with Apple now. This is fast, and this is all very recent. But the changes have been absolutely astronomical, because when you go to Wikipedia, we know that it's the general purpose machine that can be programmed to carry out arithmetical logical operations. And the key to it all is it can solve so many different sorts of problems that we don't even know yet about. But of course, when you look at this, what can't be divorced from computers is the software. And there's been a lot of research, done in digital humanities, within sociology. Software takes command, because basically our lives are being very much determined by the programs that we use. When we've got computers and we've got software, it's not neutral. It's a way of thinking, it's a way of acting, it's a way of being. And I think that one of the key points I want to make is the people behind that are developing this are determining it. The way that we're thinking about information, the way we're accessing it, generally the way we're thinking about the world. Take a very quick step back, and I want to think about communication technologies as agents of change. If you think of the printing press, basically it revolutionised the world in several different ways. We had, of course, the Renaissance, we had the Reformation, and we had the rise of modern science. Just through a technology that allowed information to be circulated in a standard sort of format. This is the printing press, and what we had from that is the first book was a book on arithmetic, but also we had the Abacus trying to make some sort of appearance, but of course what won out was the Hindu-Arabic system and the standardised algorithms that got passed to people like Newton, who could then push it into developing the calculus. So these technologies are not neutral, they're key to society, and they determine, basically the nature of the future. There's Newton coming in. He could not have moved as fast as he did unless he had access to the information that the printed books allowed. And then, of course, you've got the standardisation of algebra, and you've got different sorts of diagrams and so forth. So when I'm thinking about communication tools, which is what computing is, think about the massive changes that we've had in the very relative recent past. The blue in this diagram is text. The lighter blue is audio, like the telephone and so forth. And the pale blue is computers, which combine for the first time the visual with the audio. So we've got these new means of making meaning. It's profound, and it's basically changing the way we think about every aspect of our life, education included. So I want you to think about digital technology as semiotic technology. In other words, ways of making meaning. As Gallison said, images scatter into data, data gather into images. For the first time, we can change modes. My research area is multimodal analysis. In other words, I analyse language, I analyse images, and my background is in mathematics. So I was also analysing symbolism and seeing the way the three resources work together, which basically was the scientific view of the world. So now with computers, we've got this ability to move back and forth in all sorts of ways that we couldn't do before, and the effect is profound. So though digital representations are discrete, information, of course, such as numbers and letters, can be sounds, images, and other measurements. We're on the cusp of something I still don't think we understand completely. We understand the implications of being on the internet, and we know that there's huge significance for education, but what the nature of that is, I don't think we've barely touched. Okay, telecommunications has been dominated by digital technology since 1990. You can see the figures there. 99.9% is in digital format. The world is awash with information and with data. But what is lacking is our understanding of what sense people are making of it, the meanings that are made, and the way that people are actually using the new resources. But what Munch said in 1995, and this is like a while ago now, is that the current change from the industrial to the communication society is precisely and above all digitisation, which is an unparalleled communication boost, where communication achieves up to now its highest degree of compression, proliferation, acceleration, and globalisation. How has this affected life? Well, we heard from the three students this morning with the sunglasses and the wig and so forth. Okay, basically, there's online relationships. People are busy, I know. But people can find all kinds of support online. Most of them are specialised, however, but the main thing is getting information. Also, people go there for sociability, emotional support, material aid and a sense of belonging. The internet supports both market and cooperative approaches to finding social resources. So it's based now on communities rather than kinship and rather on locality. The net makes advice and information accessible and visible, moving beyond monopolies of expert advisors, and that includes us within the education system. People can find out a lot more than we can offer within the classroom, and do. There's also weak ties which are useful. You can get small acts of assistance, can sustain large communities, providing support and information, which also expresses identity. And so we've got a whole new culture of its own, as you can see from viral videos, virus warnings and so forth. And the egalitarian nature makes us focus on the message, not the person. And I think this is important in an educational context. We're focusing on the content, we're focusing on learning rather than the individual student. Okay, so we've got online relationships, of course, with offline. We know that. And we've got different ways participating in partial communities. And I think they're very much like real life. You have strong ties, weak ties, all sorts of ties in real life, and you have them online as well. Okay, so we've got away from locality. We've got away, from that Western shift to living in the house and doing things inside private homes. And we're building up social capital and integrating, social systems and so forth across different interest groups. Fertile ground indeed. However, when we come to computer development of tools and technologies for education and elsewhere, some computer scientists prefer the simplifiers, the artists and the pundits. In other words, they want soundbite versions that will inspire the design of an application, not a group of complex findings and ambiguous findings, such as probably the lot that we present. We're all working individually, we're all having different theories, we're all having different paradigms, we're producing bits of information which is very disparate and at times conflicting. And this is not really what computer scientists or people within industry particularly want. They want to know what's going to succeed fast, because at the back of the end of it all, of course, is money. If you think that the internet hasn't, or the net hasn't changed the way we live, have a look at this fantastic illustration, and I can send out the reference for it. It looks at the classical way of organising information using the Dewey system, say for in the library, and all the green is about science. That's the sort of knowledge that was built up through traditional means. If you look at the other side, that is Wikipedia, and what you'll see is it's dominated by pink and other colours, which is information about community and about culture. So basically, even the things that we're getting information about is changing. And I think we're moving from descriptions of the physical world. What we're on the cusp of doing is moving into descriptions of our social world. And that's a huge shift. But unfortunately, we don't have good models, we don't have good techniques, we don't have good theories for analysing what it means to be human. I mean, I know we do, we've had the tradition of psychology and cognitive science and so forth. But basically, we're moving into a new area where the information that's being documented is of a social kind, social cultural. So if we move then to computers in education, we've got a widespread adoption of digital technologies, but let's have a look at the reasons perhaps behind that. Is that because we do consider them good for learning and we do consider them good for education, or is it also the huge push about the social political realm that we find ourselves in now as educators? Universities have been tasked with using technology. Number one, to increase equity and access, but also to reduce costs. So online courses and so forth are seen as massive revenue makers. So that's the role of universities: increase access and reduce cost. And a lot of that is done, of course, as we know, by casual staff and so forth. Also, educational theorists and policymakers are promoting student-centred learning styles, including active, collaborative, inquiry-based and independent and work-based learning. Now, this paper was presented by Sherville, Brown and Whittaker. I don't know if they're in the audience, but it was done at ASCILITE a few years ago. And what they were actually arguing about was the need to include educational technologists, which I'll just come to in just a moment. But we did an analysis of university websites at the National University of Singapore, And believe me, the changes are, you can see them. This is the National University of Singapore's website in 1998. This is it in 2000. This is it in 2001. This is it in 2008. And this is it in 2009. And this is the last version in 2012. Now, what you'll see is a whole range of changes over those past years. And what happened, I was at NUS during this time, and it went from a national university into a corporation. And the big aim was to get NUS to the top of research as high as possible. And we were successful, and I'm very proud of that. They had a lot of initiatives at NUS. It was a fantastic place to work. They put a lot of money in for research and so forth. But what you'll see in this change of the website is you see that whole shift of universities to commercialisation and marketisation, and basically a whole new way of people thinking about the university. It wasn't any longer about providing information. Really what it was about was addressing students as consumers of goods and products which are offered by the university. And the website points not so much to education as a process of learning and mentoring, but as a lifestyle. And what was very interesting to me this morning in that debate, and it was fun, was the whole notion of the student getting up saying, well, I've got a busy life, I will do some of this and some of this, but I've got other things to do. And so in a sense, I mean, the way the students are perceiving the university and education and us are as consumers and clients because of the nature of the shifts that we've had. So when Sherville, Brown and Whittaker start talking about the newfound strategic importance of educational technologists within higher education, these people traditionally were like technicians and people that were developing stuff, but they didn't have the same status as academic staff. It goes beyond that. I think if we're going to get serious about, and this is my experience, about developing software and new techniques for teaching and learning, we need to accommodate the significant contribution of scientists. I don't know how many of you have degrees in computer science in the room. I would say not the majority, and I don't either. I had to hire I had computer scientists who were collaborators on my research projects, and I hired research fellows. But we're not going to make any tremendous moves into thinking about things in a new way unless we have people with the right expertise. So that's scientists. The other thing I learned was you need a large, stable research group. It is beyond anything, it's beyond what any of us can do on our own. We can have ideas, but in a sense, the way of working now is through research groups with different types of expertise. And I will show you some of the work that we did. The only way I could develop technology within my research group, which met the standard, is I had to get people from industry. I actually brought people from India. They were people who were working in industry, not doing it remotely, but bringing them into the lab to work hand in hand with my research team. Also, I think in the future, and I noticed this from being in the States, I was in quite a few universities there, is that the students now need to be able to, or some of them at least, have some computational expertise. Otherwise, we're restricting them and restricting ourselves to the technologies that are out there already. And as I alluded to this morning in the debate, we're sitting on the fringe. We're sort of being thrown bones and we grab them and we try and fit them to our context. But if we're serious about this, we need to start with basic research within education, with groups of people that have the expertise and knowledge in order to push things further. Okay, what I just said then comes from my 5 years of running a research lab. It was the Multimodal Analysis Lab. I was the director. I was also Deputy Director of the Interactive and Digital Media Institute at the National University of Singapore, and I was Associate Professor in English Language and Literature. I had a lot of grants. I mean, the advantage of being in Singapore is that they're very serious about doing research, and there's a lot of opportunities for getting money. And so I had several large grants. Now, what I'd like to do is share with you some of the work that we did, and in the end of this I'll come back to learning from the past. All of this work was done in my lab. It's not my work alone, and this is what I was saying. You cannot, the problems are so complicated and immense, it's almost beyond the days of people sitting in their own office writing about things. I followed a science model, had a research lab with a team, and we were developing different technologies. In my team, I was very fortunate. I had social scientists, I had computer scientists, I had mathematicians, and I had software developers. These are some of the names of my team. And the work that you're going to see is the result of the collaborative effort of this team. I also had a very good group of PhD students as well, and also had international collaborators from arts and also mathematics. Okay, the first research agenda that we had was to develop concepts and tools for close multimodal analysis of linguistic, visual and audio resources in images, documents, videos and websites, with the view that people today need to be multimodal literate. You need to be able to look at a web page, and you need to be able to watch a video, and you need to be able to read information which is just beyond language immediately. This is a 21st century survival skill almost. If students can't understand what they're reading, then they would not be in a position to make decisions which are probably better for them. So what we did, that was a large grant. We developed flexible, easy-to-use cross-platform software. The software was fairly complex, and this is what a lot of, I had a team to do it. What basically, you could watch a video, there was a video player, you could draw overlays on the video, you could do time-stamped annotation of the overlays, because what we were getting people to do is thinking about what they were seeing and what they were hearing, and analysing it, and all this analysis got stored in a database. So there was linguistic annotations and analysis, and they were time-stamped. The idea was to have a look at, in any second, what communication and meaning is about is multiple choices being made simultaneously. And so you get clusters of different sorts of choices. Now, some choices work well, other choices don't work so well. And the whole aim is to get students, number one, if you've got a teacher training, to get them to teach better. If people are looking at videos or looking at advertisements, to be able to see straight away what combinations are being made and what meanings came out of all of that. And so we had all sorts of annotations, and we had systems for analysis. Now, the interesting thing about that is that was really hard work, and I underestimated how difficult it was to get a team of top programmers together to develop software that was stable and could work, and how difficult it was to talk to scientists and mathematicians about how we were going to model the resulting data. I underestimated it. It took much longer than I thought. But what I did learn is you've got to get the right people, and we've got to have the avenues within the university to secure those people to work on grants like this. But what did happen is we ended up spinning off the technology, developing a company, spinning it off and developing commercial software. This was another huge learning curve for me. I mean, I was in the environment of Singapore. What they wanted was basic research. What they wanted was spin-off technology. They wanted commercialisation. And I also went through that process as well, which was also a huge learning curve as well. But basically, we developed two packages, multimodal analysis software. They had concepts and frameworks in them. And I think this is the key part. We could develop the software. It was commercial, but it was informed by theory. It was informed by a pedagogical approach was built into the software, that if students were going to discuss images or documents or videos, then they had to do an analysis systematically, and then their answer, their comprehension of what they were seeing and reading, had to use these concepts and frameworks that were built in the software. So the huge advantage of doing basic research within a university with people that have the knowledge and experience in social sciences, linguistics, education, and working with people in technology is we get what we want. We get what we need, and we don't get what's handed down to us, which has been developed often for other purposes. And so they were we made them flexible, we made them scalable for different research and teaching purposes. We always had in view that students need to learn how to read and understand what they're reading, and then they need to develop an analytical approach to when they're reading information, whether they be on the web and so forth. So the first package was multimodal analysis image. In other words, basically you could import any type of image file, and the whole idea was to get students to understand the difference between different text types or different genres between an information report and a news article. Not just the linguistic aspect, but the visual aspect of it as well. And so basically you import the image file, you can annotate it using concepts and frameworks, remembering always there was a pedagogy behind it. The analysis gets stored in a database for later retrieval and export to Excel, so you can use other data analytics tools on it. It leads to a systematic approach to multimodal analysis and promotes analytical and critical thinking. The software looks like this, the interface. What was one of the most difficult things was to make it simple, make it clean, make it efficient, make it attractive, make it intuitive. And this really came out of years and years of work of the other prototype version. You know, the first version that I showed you with all the labels on it. That was the prototype version that we developed in the lab. It was very complicated. No one could use it but us, given the years that it took to get the right sort of programming team together. So the whole idea was make it look nice, make it attractive, and also make it very simple to use. Simplicity is difficult to achieve. And so, in other words, if you were wanting to annotate something, I'll just very quickly show you. I know most of you probably don't work in literacy, but very quickly, the whole idea is that students annotate different parts of the text, they tag it, and they justify their choice. And you can see why this information text works really well. You've got visual cues because it's set up so well. You go to here, to here, to here, to here in terms of the stages of the text. If you wanted to look at the cohesive devices, within the text, you could, there's a lot of so and ifs and buts, and therefore it was an information report. It was extremely well organised. And as the students are annotating all this, it's going into the database, but also they've got a visual sort of cue of what it looks like. You can also put overlays and annotate the linguistic and visual aspects. And when you do an analysis of this text, you'll see that the tiger appears visually, the tiger appears linguistically, tiger, tiger, and it talks about people, people, then it talks about humanity, and then it talks about you donate. And so when you do this sort of analysis, students can look at and see the way information is created and the particular strategies that are being used. This has implications for science, for mathematics. This is in the context of English language, media studies. In fact, information is about different sorts of choices that combine multimodally to create meaning. As I said, my background was in mathematics. I got into this because I was looking at how language and what the teacher's saying in the classroom combines with what the teacher's writing on the board visually and using mathematical symbolism and how they all integrate. So that was multimodal, and it's all in a database. You can export it and do more analytics on it. We also developed software for video analysis. This is based on the first prototype that you saw. Once again, the whole idea was to get a very clean, attractive interface. And basically what you can do is play the video and code different choices for whatever you like. And so the whole notion is that the researcher or the student or the teacher can have different systems of analysis and code it and look at the combinations. But the critical thing that I think when we're talking with students and we're teaching them these days and when we're talking about technology is to use the technology to look at the data in different sorts of ways. So the analysis that you just saw gets stored in a database, and then the students go to the visualization tool, and automatically all the data that they entered gets showed in these sort of visualizations which are interactive, and you can play the video. And so you can make claims about the different stages of the video, developing once again students' analytical skills. And so what you can show is that this particular advertisement for the Singapore Air Force had 3 different phases, and they were made up of lots of different sorts of choices. You can look at issues such as gender and ideas and concepts within any type of text, and then have a visualization of the sort of results. So the whole notion behind all this was to develop learning technologies which had a pedagogical approach built into them, which also used different types of techniques to display and look at the data. And so it went into a database. What we wanted to do then was mathematically model the resulting patterns. In other words, see, the thing is we've got so much information, we've got so much data. How do we make sense of it? So we're also looking at mathematical techniques. This was funded by the US Air Force, Office of Scientific Research. Basically, of course, they're interested in the analysis of information for terrorism and so forth. And one wedding I meant to the CIA were there. The whole problem today is I know people can, I thought it was better to understand what's happening at the centre than remain on the periphery. It's better to understand what the concerns are and to meet the people that are working on these sorts of problems. I always feel, I came from a Department of Education and I always felt sidelined. It wasn't until I went to NUS and was in the Department of English Language and then got my lab that I was actually working with scientists, computer scientists and engineers, and there was a legitimacy there that I hadn't felt before through being in education. That's my personal experience. It's many, many years ago. But to a certain extent, that may ring true to some of you sitting in the audience today. So I don't want the... Oh. Okay, so this is when I worked with a mathematician. This is what the data looks like when you're doing analysis and you've got different choices combining over different sorts of times. And we had to actually, we were going to use dynamical systems theory to analyse it. In the end, the mathematician I was working with became ill, and so we didn't get that far. But we looked at different mathematical techniques, clustering techniques, and really what this analysis was about, it was an analysis of a climate science debate. And what there was in the interview was there was a climate scientist and there was a guy from big business, and he was very media savvy. He looked directly at the camera. He knew exactly what he was going to say. He came in at the right time, made these claims about what the climate scientist had been up to. In the end, the climate scientist lost the debate. It's a typical scenario. But during the analysis, what we could see that were 3 phases, and the black is actually the climate denialist when he held the ground in the middle of the debate and actually won it. He wasn't talking the longest time. He just had particular strategies that allowed him to position his argument, which overrode the types of choices that the climate scientist was making. And our analysis showed that. We had different ways of visualising it. These are clusters of choices and so forth. I guess the significance here is that we can use different techniques, mathematical techniques, to look at different types of data and to look at results. And all this has implications for, for the types of context that you're doing for research. But what my point would be very strongly is we need good people. We need good people to work with, people that have the expertise. It's one of the lessons that I learned through running the lab. We also looked at temporal relations and did mathematical techniques of that. What we found out is the climate denialist, he acted as an initiator, he smiled, he engaged, he put the climate scientist on the back foot. The climate scientist never really recovered. And we could show that, how that happened through the analysis of the choices. The other project that I was working on was developing a pedagogical approach for multimodal literacy using online interactive digital technology. And this actually was funded by the Ministry of Education in Singapore. I was working on this project, but I had to cut it when I came to, had to terminate it when I came to Australia, but I'm going to pick it up. What we ended up doing was using our software and simulating an online environment and then recording chat using Google Hangout and Google Chat. We logged the data and then we were doing some analytics on the way students were collaborating, both when they were analysing a text and when they were analysing videos. So in other words, we had all the data of everything. We had the students' work and we had what they were saying, and what we were going to do was analyse both. And this was in a Singapore school where we were actually doing the data. And the data analysis was understanding how students collaborate in an online interactive environment, both through the annotations, their analysis, through their chat, and also their on-screen display. This is multimodal analysis. Language, images, video, the whole lot, and looking at what students do when they work collaboratively together. The last project was, that was all manual. I mean, doing, analysis of what people are saying and doing is extremely difficult. And if we had automated techniques, I think Google would buy us out. So a lot of that was providing platforms that we found out more about multimodal analysis, and then significantly and importantly encourage students to actually do the analysis themselves. And then they can get up and present it. Or your trainee teachers can get up and present their analysis of themselves as they're learning to teach. It's all about becoming aware of what people are saying, what they're doing, movement, gesture, the whole lot. But the last project, what we really wanted to do was look at automated analysis. As I've said several times, we're awash with data and information, so we were looking at automated techniques, and this was funded by the National University of Singapore. We did quite a few studies. I'm going to very quickly go through them because they're not so relevant perhaps to the concerns of everyone here. But we analysed street fashion, we analysed Twitter, Instagram and Foursquare data, and we did some other studies which I won't go through here. We downloaded automatically a lot of images of street fashion in Japan. We used computational techniques to organise them in a self-organising map. In that way we could see the different types of fashions that were there, the pastels versus the blacks. This is the beauty of working with computer scientists. They can develop these sorts of technologies which we would find and can find useful for our own types of research. So in other words, we took the image, we took the top, we took the bottom, looked at the colour, and then arranged it in a map accordingly. So that was using feature calculation and back projection into a self-organising map. You can see the gaps where it wasn't a complete colour space, and we could actually see that in Japan and perhaps elsewhere they're favouring a lot of black or black and white combinations. We also mapped it over time, over real time, and so you could see changing fashion if you wanted to, over season to season, year to year, and so forth. We didn't do all that, it was only exploratory study. We did networks as well as a representative sample. Now what this does is lead to analytical approaches, if you've got a lot of data, of providing a justification while you're looking at this and this and this and the patterns overall throughout time. The other interesting one we did was in Singapore, and it was analysing how people use Twitter and how people use Instagram according to where they are in the nature of the social activity. This has lots of implications for educational and distance research. I mean, you've got people in different parts of the world doing different sorts of things. Very quickly, and I'm going to wrap up, I'll probably talk for about another 5 minutes because I want to leave some time for questions. In this, the blue is, the pink is Foursquare data, in other words, locations of where everyone is. We saw on the app that you have location data, incredible rich source of information about what people are doing, what where. So that is all the Foursquare data. The yellow was, I think that's Instagram, and the blue was Twitter. So in other words, we had, when you're on these online, as you know, the data is all accessible. This was a couple of months' data from Singapore. It had to be geotagged. We put a grid on Singapore, normalised the data. The big squares mean that, you know, it could be in the middle of the lake or something. And what we were really interested in is looking at the Twitter messages, what sentiment was expressed, and we got a series of vectors. We're looking at what people were posting in terms, we did face detection because it's an easy one, and we did Foursquare. Now the interesting thing what we did with the Foursquare data is we used the Wikipedia categories to organise the Foursquare data into social activities. So we could see what people were doing in these different locations in Singapore according to the nature of their social activity that they were doing. And we had an interactive map where we could zoom in, zoom out, we clustered all the data, and what you could see is that different clusters occurred in different parts of Singapore. Basically the findings were this. People will express emotion using Twitter differentially. In the business district in Singapore there wasn't a lot of emotion in the Twitter. But in Little India, or, you know, places where people are having fun, there was much more sort of emotion expressed through the Twitter. But the interesting thing is people would take photographs of each other and themselves regardless of where they were. The selfie, apparently it's in the first word of the new word for the Oxford English Dictionary. People will take photographs if they're in the business district or if they're in Orchard Road or where they are. So there's something about the nature of social media and the image which goes across different types of social activities. Okay, just to wind up then, that's some of the data there that we can show you to support those findings. If anyone's interested in any of these papers, I can send them to you. Okay, so just to conclude, the generation of wealth, the exercise of power and the creation of cultural codes came to depend on the technological capabilities of societies and individuals. And information technologies now are at the core. They're at the core of all of this. This is Castell's ages ago. So if we're learning from the past, these are my observations of the experience that I've been through, 15 years in Sing and before that as a teacher for 10 years within the context of Australian high schools. Just thinking about it now, as this is just really to start things off, it's a relatively new phenomenon. It's an agent of change, in this case a massive agent of change. We've seen the impact, we feel the impact. Where it's leading to, I think, is still a question, and I look forward to the other keynotes that are looking at the present and the future. The education landscape involves digital technologies, globalisation and marketisation. We're caught in this environment of doing what we're doing, and I haven't done a study on this, but I suspect that a lot of the digital technologies that are being used with the university sector now about management. It's about management of courses, it's about management of grades, it's about management of learning. And that's needed and that's necessary, I'm not criticising that. But what I'm saying is where are the technologies for learning in order to equip students for the sorts of life they're doing that they face now. And students are actually very good at sourcing out information. I mean, these days this is what you do. But think about what we're doing within the context of higher education and the sorts of technologies that we've got. And I would say, and I know this from experience, that if we're going to do something significant, if we're really going to bring in technologies that are going to change the way students are thinking, both about knowledge and about the world and about themselves and about meeting the challenges, I think we need specialist groups beyond the expertise, certainly that I have. But with that comes a lot of challenges. It's not easy working across the disciplines. And I would say it's the integration of more than two cultures. We're integrating multiple cultures in order, I think, to hopefully move ahead with using technology-assisted technologies within higher education today. And that's it. These are the online references, and any publications that you're interested in, I'd be more than welcome to send out. So thank you.
I really enjoyed that because I think it goes to actually taking some lessons from the past, which are nice challenges for Gregor and Mark coming. So you've got to work on your presentation again tonight. No, sorry about that. Are there any questions that people would like to ask Kay? Because we have a few minutes at this point. Yes, Rob, can you speak out from there?
Yeah, I'll speak up. Sorry, I skipped you. Back in the 90s, places like the University of Wollongong in Hamburg and Harper had these labs full of people who programmers and things like that, and many universities had that environment. They don't anymore, so the question is, it's very difficult to set up the sort of team that you're talking about with programmers and educationalists. That doesn't seem to exist anymore, so how do we get back to there?
I think we need to get back to there, and I'm not talking just about computer scientists. I'm not just talking about programmers. Within our team, we had a large development team, but we were telling them what to design. I mean, they were having feedback as well. We need the scientists on board. If you look at the huge innovations, I mean, look at what Apple is. Look at how they did what they did. Look at any innovation. You've got groups of people that are extremely good at what they do. So it's beyond programs and educational technologists and all of that. It's basic science. My honest answer to that is that the problems that we're facing today require such groups, and I know this because I know that the problems that different institutions are facing, and I'm talking not only about the government and industry, I'm talking about defence as well. The problems that we're facing require the expertise of humanities and social science and the technology people, because the technology people can't solve it alone. They don't have the sociological knowledge, linguistic knowledge, and so forth. So my experience is it's already swung back. Maybe it hasn't here in Australia, but I'm sure it will. I hope it will anyway. I hope it will.
Any other? I think you've scared them.
I haven't scared them, for goodness sakes. I've probably been in Singapore too. It's a very dynamic environment there, very, very. And it's very progressive, and it's looking. And it looks, I mean, what I could have said within all this is too, we'll be looking not only at the labs, Rob, and universities with the programs and the scientists, we're going to be looking to industry because that's where the money is in a lot of cases. Now, there's a lot of negatives about that because industry has an agenda. But then again, there's a lot of good people in industry, and some of the issues that industry are facing are the same ones that the institutions are facing, and that is how do we map social cultural change today in the world? Because it's fast, and we still don't know how it is. But there's lots of people that are interested in that problem. We can harness it for our own purposes.
There's one right at the back.
Yep. I only say that because when you want to operationalise something, I think you've raised a really good point, and thank you for this. If you want to operationalise something or explore ideas, you need people with the expertise who have the knowledge to actually explore different things. People come from backfield, a teacher, a student, anyone with ideas about what could happen. And this is actually, when you look at the history of Apple, I mean, this is actually how it went. So when I said at the end, see, the traditional thing is two cultures, humanities versus the sciences. This is snow. C.P. Snow back from the 1950s. But what you've just said is something really interesting, is someone with none of these expertise can have the idea and has a role to play within all that. And the other role, what I also should have emphasised, that within the lab we had a designer, and he was a terrific designer who looked at the interfaces. I mean, the interfaces that you saw were about designing as well. So I think when I said more than two cultures, I mean multiple cultures, and that can include anyone.
One last question. Over here, Kate.
There's one here too. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Two last questions.
Yep.
You mentioned that the university have moved to commercialise
Yep.
the tools that you develop.
Yep.
What's the current state of those tools? How can they be accessed?
Okay, I'll explain this very quickly. What happened is I formed a spin-off company. I own the company. And I had to pay NUS to license the technology, and then I paid people from India, brought them over and developed the technology. So it was done by industry standards. I looked at selling it through commercial companies. I won't name them. And what they wanted to do was add profit on the top of those products. So I did it myself. And the reason I did it myself is because it was going to be a lot cheaper. And so the software is very, very dirt cheap. It's like, for the video analysis software, it's $250 US. For image, it's 150. For students, it's 200. And for the other one is 100. So I kept the cost right down. So the software is online. You can type multimodal analysis company or multimodal analysis image or multimodal analysis video, you find me. And so the software's down there for download. It's a trial version. You can have a look at it for free. If you're interested, email me. But it was really, really a difficult thing to do. Number one, to get the agreement with the university, then to get the programmers in, form a company, and of course there's all implications of all of that. But the whole aim was make it cheap, make it affordable, make it accessible. Because all the work we'd done in the lab, the prototype version that we'd done, could only be used by people in the lab. And the whole problem, and this goes back to what Rob was talking about and also the other question, is that when you have research groups and they finish and the funding stops, you need to find ways to continue them, because often what happens with technology is they finish and then that's it, and then everything moves on. So this was a way of keeping it going. So there's no more development happening at the moment. I'm starting up a research group at Curtin. I'm not sure how this software will fit in that because we're moving on too, but it's online and you can have a look at it.
The other question from you?
Sorry?
Mine was a slightly different question. You showed the evolution of the website.
Yep.
And kind of seemed to say that part of that evolution was a marketing
It was.
response. But I also wonder whether some of that is also the way that we are changing in how we want to receive information.
Yep.
There is a much greater interest, I suppose, in the visual. The technology is allowing us to do that. So I just wondered if you want to speak to that. I thought it was more than just
Sure.
now doing this marketing, but also something about how the
Yep.
modes that we want to use
Yep.
change.
Someone did a study, and there's actually not more, this was in tourist brochures in Helsinki, very specific case, but they weren't more visual than what they were, but the way that they provided information was. Okay, it's not just that there's more images, and obviously there are, because technology allows this. I mean, there's more videos. I mean, video is a way of communicating today because of the technology. So the images were larger, but we also did analysis of what was in the images. And if you looked at that last one, it was a group of students standing around talking. Of course, it's always multicultural. But in the original images, the students are looking out, trying to attract you in. But in the end, in these NUS websites, you're placed as an observer looking at students as they're socialising. And so it wasn't just that there was more image, it was the nature of the image and also the angle, the point of view on it all. And it was also the links. It was, we did an analysis not only of the images but also the links. It really was about marketing and about marketing a product to students. And that paper's written up and I'll be happy to send it if you're interested in that. It was interesting. I mean, the shift is real. And it's in, you don't actually really always recognise it because the things move so fast. This was a PhD study by one of my students, Ichong Singh.
Can I invite everybody
Thank you.
to thank Kay for the presentation? Thank you very much.
That was good. Was it? Was it all right? It was a bit different, I think, maybe, to what people
Okay, some housekeeping before you disappear. I'll be as quick as possible. Some changes to the program and some options. Oh, sorry. Oh.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
The book launch in the program scheduled for tomorrow lunch has been moved to Wednesday morning at 8:50, so there won't be any books given away at that time, but there are 10 copies of Curriculum for the New 21st Century. I think I've got the title right. At Wednesday morning at 8:50. This afternoon there's a whole lot of things happening, including workshops. The digital poster sessions, which start about 4 o'clock, are upstairs behind on the first floor of this building. We ask you to actually attend and vote. Everybody has something that looks a bit like that. Can't show you. Anyway, there is a ballot box, and we would like you to vote on the best paper, if you can do that, when you visit the digital poster sessions. The room is quite interesting. There are 10 screens all around the room and a computer running each one. You should find the voting form in the satchel. If you haven't got it, please see the people at the registration desk. There are 2 workshops against that this afternoon. There's an Epigeum workshop, Walking the Talk, and there's, after it, a Desire to Learn workshop. So look in the program and see what these options are. You might be running a bit after afternoon tea. The other thing, too, is those people that at least I know you all know where the active learning space is, because there are 150 people that got turned away from the presentation this morning by Matt Bauer and his colleagues. We will be repeating that on Wednesday at 2:30 in this theatre. So if you fail to see it then, before lunch, it will be repeated here. Having said that, the group is also running a small workshop, which is a practical workshop, from 4:30 to 6 this afternoon in C5A room 204. So if you actually want to go and get your hands dirty, there is an opportunity for an hour or so then to do that. By the way, C5A room 204 is, if you go out of the building, you see an awful lot of sand. It's in the direction towards the library, just across the other side of the sand. And the last thing, everybody should have realised that tonight we have, after the last session, the screening of Electric Dreams in this theatre. Those of you, has anybody seen it? Oh, good. It'll be a surprise. The point of showing it is the film is in fact 30 years old, and it's sort of cute and nice, I guess, but there's a scene in it where he goes into a computer store and asks to buy a computer. Just listen to what the sales assistant says in a response, because it's interesting that what has happened and what has disappeared. I'll leave that with you. That's on in here after some refreshments after the workshops.
Ollie's going. I told Ollie.
Innovation and learning. So